Buddy, welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with you tonight. Sorry for the delay, a little last minute messaging and emails and stuff like that. Life gets in the way, doesn't it? But it is Friday night, and yeah, we're going to have a great conversation here. I think we're going to have a lot of good things to talk about. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and let's have a late night conversation.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. Some people start their streams very, very late. That's a common thing that happens. People start their streams really, really, really late. And they wait for people to pile in, and then they start their streams. I'm not the type that does that. I tend to always start on time. But lately, there's been a few times where I start 5 minutes late, I start 10 minutes late or whatever. But here I am. And thank you all for waiting. I'm glad that you all are here. It's been a pretty good day. It's been a busy day, but a good busy day. It's been a good busy day. So yeah, before we get to everything, I will do some quick business announcements for everybody. First business announcement is that our next patrons only stream, the first Patreon only stream of the year, will be happening on January 2nd, on Monday. So if you would like to be part of that, sign up. Go ahead and sign up on the Patreon. That's for patrons only, and it's small and intimate. I do them into my phone rather than into the webcam, and I just sit there. I don't bring any prepared opening remarks. I just answer people's questions. So if you want to be part of that, that's a special opportunity for our patrons only community, our Patreon community. So if you want to sign up and be part of that, that's great. Also, the Center for Political Innovation, we are back in business, we are functioning, and we are having a conference on March 25th. So mark your calendar for March 25th, location to be announced. It will be on the East Coast. But if you would like to be involved in the planning of our upcoming conference and other details, by all means, just sign up on the website. And here's the link to sign up on the website. And the Center for Political Innovation is back in business. And we have weekly meetings, weekly Zoom call meetings to determine our activities. And on top of that, we're planning a very exciting in real life conference. So if you want to be part of that, join the Center for Political Innovation. Our meetings are going very well. There tend to be quite a few people that attend those Saturday meetings to get their weekly orientation. We also have a public speaking training course going on. It's being directed by Elizabeth. She's doing a great job with that. We have some other projects in the works. It's very exciting. So by all means, become a member of the Center for Political Innovation, and then you can be part of our activities. So those are my two comments. And the way these streams work is I tend to give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are then followed by the roll call, and we find out who it is on the other side of the camera. Who's on the other side of the camera, who's watching. It's always a great crew of folks watching. We have a great community here on these streams. It's really, really great. And on top of that, then at the end, I do the super chat questions. I answer super chats. As the streams go on, I'm always writing things down. If people have any super chat questions, I'll be writing them down as we go on. And then after the roll call and after my opening remarks, I answer the super chat questions. And that's how it works. So if there's something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, send me a super chat and I will do just that. I will answer your question. I always try to give people answers to their questions. Not always the answers people want, but I do my best. Sometimes people ask a really good question and they get me going and I've got a lot to say. But other times, not so much. Sometimes people ask me about things I just don't know about. And I just have to be honest and say, I don't know. But there is something special about the second half of our shows. There's something special about them. And the reason that the second half of our shows are so special, I think, is because I'm just being natural. It's just off the cuff comments. People ask me questions about history or my opinion about this or that. And it's off the cuff and we're very natural and we're just having fun together. That's really the glory of these streams. Is it's like we're hanging out with a group of friends. That's what I feel like when I'm on here with all of you. I feel like I'm hanging out with a group of friends. It's late at night and I'm just chilling with some friends, answering their questions, engaging. We have some running jokes about unnamed diet beverage, etc. And it's just really a relaxed, fun environment. Sometimes I get fired up when I give opening remarks, but other times, it's just kind of chill and relaxed. And that's the glory of what we do here. It's really a community. Here we engage, we discuss, we debate, and I'm really, really happy to be here. So I guess I'll go into the opening remarks now. If people have super chat questions for the second half, I'll write them down. But for my opening remarks tonight, I've got just a few thoughts. I almost don't want to say this. I feel like my opening remarks tonight won't go on as long, but whenever I say that, I suddenly get fired up and my opening remarks go on longer than I had intended. There's something spontaneous about these streams. And whenever I say, oh, it'll be short opening remarks, I look at the thing and it's like 2 hours later and I'm still doing them. So maybe that won't be the case, but I feel like I'm going to have brief opening remarks for tonight. I feel like they will be brief opening remarks, but we shall see. And I'm writing down the first super chat. What amendments would have to be added to the U.S. Constitution? Okay. What amendments would have to be added? U.S. Constitution. Interrelationship of private property. Private property and allow socialist development. Very good question. Wrote it down. We'll be addressing that in the second half of the program. But yeah, I feel like tonight's opening remarks will be short, but hey, I could be wrong. I may prove myself wrong because what we do here is collaborative. And that's how I just wanted to start out my opening remarks. I guess just point out that what we're doing here is a deeply collaborative, interactive thing. And even if you're watching this later, even if you're not in the chat right now, there's well over 100 people now. Usually it gets above 200 on here, sometimes 300, 400 people watching. But even if you're not in the chat right now, even if you're watching this later, I read the comments. As much as I don't like them sometimes. I like them a lot of times. A lot of times there's great comments that are left here, but I read the comments. And that what we're doing here is a very interactive thing. It's a very community-oriented, interactive thing. I'm reading the chat as it goes by. I'm answering people's questions. This is very, very, very interactive. This is a community thing, right? This isn't, if I just wanted to talk, I would just get a webcam and talk into it and post it afterwards. But that's not what we're doing here. That wouldn't have the magic of these social media lives, of these live streams. It wouldn't have the magic. Right now we're on Facebook, we're on Rockfin, we're on YouTube. We're looking into maybe starting to do streams on Rumble, maybe starting to do streams on some other social media apps, but we're on at least 3 different platforms just right now. We tend to have exciting, interactive conversations, and it's the community here. It's the comments people make in the chat. It's the running jokes, the questions people ask. It is very, very, very interactive, what we do here. And that's why I am so thankful to all of you. Today, I turned 35 years old. I am 35 years of age as of today. Today, I am 35. And it is my birthday. And on my birthday, I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart, because you all have made this community what it is. You have all made this community special. And you guys are watching. Some of you are watching. I know Neil Fraser is in Hong Kong. He's watching from Hong Kong, China. There are people watching from Australia right now. I think David's in the chat. He's from Australia. We got Jenny Lynn from Cincinnati. We'll do the roll call later. But there are people watching this stream in Russia right now. There are people watching this stream in Germany right now. We stretch across continents and across time zones. This is like a very, very special community that we have here that is regular. I'm on here almost every night these days, ever since, I got the new apartment, and now I don't have to fight with my wife over the living room. We get on here about every night, and you guys have really given me something to look forward to. I look forward to doing these streams, and I'm always looking for new topics and new opportunities to talk with this community about, and you guys appreciate what I do. And it's really, really beautiful. Really, really beautiful what we do on these streams. It's really, really special. And I want to thank you all for it. Thank you for it. Thank you for coming back and watching regularly. Thank you for asking good questions. Thank you for being supporters of the work that we do. Thank you for being on our side. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because it's been an exciting year. It's been a very exciting year. And honestly, I wasn't planning to do a whole year in review, right? If I was going to do that, I guess I would do that tomorrow. Tomorrow's stream is going to be a little bit earlier. I would say it won't be as late as tonight's stream. It'll probably be early evening tomorrow night, I think. But we will have a stream tomorrow. But, I think this year of 2022, a lot has been accomplished. The Center for Political Innovation, we had 2 different public conferences. We had 1 awesome, exciting national retreat. We published several books. Our membership expanded. We got covered in Newsweek. Our community was featured in Newsweek. I was quoted in Newsweek talking about the Center for Political Innovation. This was a great year. This was a year of great advances. A year of great, great advances. We are something that they cannot ignore. They cannot ignore us any longer. And we are looking ahead already. We have got the next big in-person live event scheduled March 25th, and it's going to be awesome. And we have accomplished so much. And so much of that is the hard work that you all have done and the loyalty that you all have shown. You all have shown a huge amount of loyalty to what we do here. Right? Because, look, there is every effort in the world to keep you guys from listening to me. They have pulled out all the stops to get you all not to listen to me. And here you are. Here you are. And that shows that what we're doing here is very, very special. What we're doing here is amazingly special. And you all want to be here. No one's paying you to be here. There's no cash incentive for you all to be, watching this stream on YouTube. No one's making you do this. This isn't your job. You just genuinely want to be here. And night after night after night, you all want to be here. And that's beautiful. And I want to be here too. And I value all of you. And every one of you has the ability to nudge this community and to have an impact on it. And you may underestimate that, but the comments that you make, the questions that you ask, all of this helps our community to move in a different direction. We don't all agree about everything. Not everyone in the chat here agrees about everything. I talk about controversial issues here. And that's one thing on here that is true about us, is that we are not afraid of controversy. We're not afraid of controversy. And I'm not afraid of saying things that even regular members of the community here disagree with, right? I know I like to talk about God and religion. There's a lot of folks in this community that are atheists, and that's okay. And if you don't like when I talk about God and religion, you like when I talk about the communism stuff, you must be here for a reason. And that's what makes this special. And there's a lot of folks in this chat that want me to say one thing about social issues or say another thing about social issues, but I'm not going to do that. And you stick around because you appreciate that while we don't dwell on the LGBT stuff, we don't dwell on abortion and gay marriage, we do dwell on stuff that is important to all of us, like the struggle against imperialism and the struggle for economic justice and the struggle to keep your head up in this evil world and the struggle to have community. So there's a lot of you that are here and from different perspectives, but you see the value of what we do here. We do something special. We do something special. We do something really, really special here, and that's really, really valuable. And you're a part of it by being here, by watching these streams night after night. You are part of this. And let's not ignore what's so special here. Let's not ignore it. And let's not ignore the fact that what we do here, as much as they have tried so hard to kill it, as much as they've tried so hard to kill this community, we continue to survive, right? I mean, and let's just say that this year I got an upgrade. I got a promotion. Because for the longest time, the response of the Breadtube community to me and the response of the internet community was to misrepresent my positions, claim I'm some kind of white supremacist or neo-Nazi or advocating fascism, number one. And then number two, to make fun of me and make it sound like I'm stupid, like I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just some kind of clown or nerd. But this year, I got a promotion. I have been promoted from clown to supervillain. I am now a supervillain. And that is an honor. That is an honor. The fact that I have gone from clown to supervillain means that they are much more scared of me than they were before. And they are much more determined to scare people away from this community than they were before. I got upgraded to supervillain. So you are all watching a supervillain. Remember, hashtag Caleb eats babies. I eat babies for a living. I maniacally brainwash people in order to get them to go kidnap the babies so I can eat them. I force my poor innocent wife to boil the babies for me, and then I devour them. I'm a supervillain. I am, as Anthony is saying here in the chat, I am Dr. Evil, and you are all watching Dr. Evil. So I consider that a great step forward, before I was just this nerd who actually takes these ideas seriously. Now I am a supervillain. So I'm honored to be a supervillain. I consider that to be an upgrade, right? We've upgraded throughout this year, throughout the activities that we've done, the videos that we've made. We have upgraded to supervillain status. That is what is accomplished. If someone asks me, what, Caleb, did you accomplish in your 34th year of life on Earth in the year of 2022? I will say to them, 2022 is the year I got upgraded to being a supervillain. A supervillain. So thank you. Thank you for that. But honestly, there's a couple other things I wanted to talk about on this stream here tonight. Wanted to describe for you all my day. So I woke up today. I did some work from home. I did some reporting for RT for my job. Did a live broadcast piece. Recorded a news package that I put together. After that, I went to the gym, and I didn't have much time at the gym because I was meeting some friends later. Today was a weight day, so I went and I lifted some weights. I lifted some weights, upper body. My upper body has always been weak. I'll just be honest about that. I could never do a pull-up when I was a kid in school, and I've always had a weak upper body. So when I do weights at the gym, it's upper body weights, right? I pull the thing down, I pull the thing down, I push the thing forward, I push the thing forward. That's the way I tend to do it on weights days. And then after I do after I do weights days, after I do weights, then I do a little bit of cardio. So I did a little bit of cardio. I got on the cardio machine for a good 25 minutes. Didn't do a full cardio exercise, just enough to get the sweat flowing. Came home, took a shower, and my wife and we went and had a nice meal, a nice barbecue dinner with a friend. We talked about various things. This is a longtime friend of mine. Shout out to you if you're watching. Longtime friend of mine. Longtime friend of mine met us at a nice barbecue place. My wife and I and this friend, we all ate some barbecue. And then after that, my wife and I, we took the subway home. We came home and got ready for this stream, and there was some last minute emails and texts and stuff like that. And I didn't start as soon as I intended, but that was my day. And, I couldn't be more thankful for a nice, relaxing birthday. My birthday comes in the middle of the holiday season. It's right before New Year's, 3 or 4 days after Christmas. And so to have a nice, relaxing day, did some work from home, went to the gym, had some barbecue, and now I'm here streaming with all of you. Couldn't be more thankful to have a day like that. This is a decent life. But I am the kind of person that's never allows myself to get comfortable. I never allow myself to get comfortable, right? I never do, right? I'm always looking ahead, and I'm always looking to get overwhelmed, right? I'm the kind of person that when I'm not overwhelmed, I'm bored, and when I'm not bored, I'm overwhelmed. I always want to get myself working on so many things, and so it's important to pace yourself. It's important to learn to slow down, but that's how I am. And I think about that because, not only is today, December 30th, my birthday. Today, December 30th, is the anniversary of me moving to New York City. And I will never forget the day that I moved to New York City. December 30th, 2010. It was December 30th, 2010. And the night before, 2 nights before, I was in Ohio. And sat down with some members of my family. I was planning to go to New York City for a month, only a month. And sat down with my family, and they said, don't go, Caleb. Don't go to New York. Don't do this. All right. You're barely getting by here in Cleveland. You've been working at gas stations and losing your job at gas stations. You've been selling your blood plasma. You've been going days without food. You can't do this. You can't do this. And I said, no, I'm going to be taken care of when I go to New York. I've got friends. They want me to come to New York. Weird story. The reason I was originally supposed to go to New York was because the Workers' World Party didn't have any pamphlets. That was the reason, that they did not have any pamphlets for their literature table. They did not have any pamphlets for their literature table. They had a book called Generals Over the White House, which was a critique of Jimmy Carter's administration. And they had another pamphlet called Imperialism and the Crisis in the Socialist Camp that was about the Kampuchea War. And they had a pamphlet from like 1991 called Soviet Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, explaining the fall of the Soviet Union. And they didn't have any pamphlets. And so they wanted me to, the understanding was I was going to come to New York City because a certain person who had just rejoined the party, but was a big deal in the party in like the 80s, was now working in the New York City office. And she was complaining about the fact that they didn't have any pamphlets. And so she said to me, Caleb, I understand you're in Cleveland and, and you're struggling, you're between jobs or whatever. I can arrange for you to come to New York for a month to help me put out some new pamphlets. I thought that was very exciting. I like pamphlets, I like pamphlets. I like literature. My apartment is full of books and pamphlets. And I thought, wow, I could help the Workers' World Party have some new pamphlets. So the idea was that I was one of these young people that was savvy with computers and techie and all of that. I was to come to New York City to help them publish some pamphlets for a month. And so I got on the Greyhound bus, and the Greyhound bus in Cleveland, I got on the Greyhound bus, and I had 2 little packets of NyQuil, and I swallowed those 2 little packets of NyQuil. And as we pulled out of the Cleveland bus station, I slept as much as I could in those seats. I don't sleep very well in the bus sitting up. You know what I mean? I slept as well as I could in those seats. And then I woke up when the sun came up. The sun came up when we were in New Jersey. I think we were still in Pennsylvania. The sun came up. And the sun came up, and the farm country was out there, but pretty soon we were in New Jersey, and there was snow everywhere. There was snow everywhere, and then we were in New Jersey, and then pretty soon we were going into the tunnel into Manhattan, and pretty soon we were at the Port Authority. We were at the Port Authority, and I got out of the bus, and I was there. And, you know, it was funny. I had like a flip phone. You remember those? I did not have a smartphone. Smartphones were not totally a thing yet. I had like a flip phone. And so I got out my little flip phone and I called this contact in New York. And I said, I just got in. My bus just arrived. It was like 10 in the morning. And I said, should I go to the party office? And the woman said, no. Meet us at, and she gave me this address. And it was the MTA headquarters. Because if people don't remember, if you were a New York City resident, you remember 2010, there had just been a big snowstorm. There had just been a big snowstorm in the city. There had just been a big snowstorm in the city. And during the snowstorm, they had not called up the city workers to plow the streets. And so it had caused a big catastrophe, and there were a lot of car accidents and all of that. So the People's Power, or no, it wasn't that yet. It was the Bail Out the People movement, which was like one of the Workers' World Party mass organizations, front groups, whatever you want to call it. They had a small protest outside of the MTA headquarters, and it was the MTA, the Manhattan Transit Authority. And they were outside, and they were like 5 or 6 people in the snow, standing there with signs, chanting, Mayor Bloomberg, you should know. We want you to shovel snow. Mayor Bloomberg, you should know. We want you to shovel snow. And that was my introduction. That was my first day living in New York City, was chanting that, Mayor Bloomberg, you should know. We want you to shovel snow. And that was my introduction to living in New York City. And there you go. That was my arrival in New York City. And after the protest, I went to McDonald's, and there was this McDonald's on 14th Street that had a lot of TVs in it, and I sat there in McDonald's and I ate a Big Mac, and I pulled out my laptop, and I saw all the people sending me birthday messages for my birthday. And, that was my first day in New York City. And it was a wild ride. Let me just put it that way. I thought I was staying for a month, but somebody warned me before I left town. There was an old man. It wasn't not an old man. There was an older person, I should say, someone much older than I was, but not old. There was an older person in Cleveland who said to me, an older communist, he said, I have a feeling you won't be coming back. You're going to be moving to New York City. And I said, no, this is just a month. You don't know what you're talking about. No, this is just a month. And he said, no, I have a feeling you're going to be in New York. And I said, okay. Well, he was right. He was absolutely right. This person also gave me a very good piece of advice, right? This was an older man. He was in his 40s, I think. He was in his 40s, and I was in my early 20s. I was 23. That was the day I turned 23. And, he said to me one day, I was short on money when I was in Cleveland. I was short on money, and I found out that one could sell copper wire. And I had a whole bunch of used electronics at the place that were no value anymore. So I spent the whole night stripping the rubber off of the copper wire, and I made this big ball of copper. And then this guy drove me to the shop yard, right? And I had this big ball of copper. I'd spent the whole night ripping the wire off and assembling all this copper. I had this big ball of copper wire, and it was heavy. It was very heavy. And I thought, I'll get some money for this. So I got to the scrapyard, and I brought in my big ball of copper wire, and I put it on the thing, and they said, that'll be 78 cents. And I was just like, whoa. I think it was like 78 cents, 80 cents or something like that. And I was like, wow, I worked all night for that. And I was just like, I was pretty bummed. I was pretty bummed that I got 78 cents for all that copper wire. And I'd heard, that people were breaking into foreclosed homes and like ripping the wires out. And so I thought like this would be a lot of copper. I thought there was money in copper wire. There is not, right? There is not. So, so then I remember I got back in the car with this guy who was a friend of mine. And he said, Caleb, what you should learn from this is to focus on the politics. Focus on the politics. And that made me smile. It makes me smile to look back on that because everyone around me was telling me the opposite. My family was telling me the opposite. Even some other communists were telling me the opposite. They were saying, don't focus on the politics, Caleb. Don't focus on the politics. There was people that said I should go back to college, go back to law school. There were some other people that were telling me to just get a regular job, just keep politics as a side hobby. But I wanted to be a revolutionary. I was obsessed. I lived, breathed, and slept revolution. I had studied the history of the three internationals. I had studied the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union short course. And the financial crisis was still fresh. 2008, the financial meltdown had happened. And, I was believing this was the time, to be revolutionary. And all these people were telling me, no, just, you don't want to do this. You don't want to live this way, Caleb. You don't want to be a revolutionary. But this guy said to me, stick with the politics. And he was right. He was right. But he was right for me, right? Not everyone can do this, right? You have to be obsessed in a way. You have to be, be willing to give yourself to this. Not everyone can do this, but this person told me, to stick with the politics. And I came to New York and I stuck with the politics. And it's been 12 years since that day. And here I am in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and so much has changed. The political scene has changed. My life has changed. The world has changed. I look completely different. I don't have long hair and a beard. So much has changed. So much has changed. But what hasn't changed is my commitment to all of this. What hasn't changed is my opposition to all of this, my seriousness, my belief that, yes, we do need socialism, my belief that there is no other choice, there is no other way, my opposition to U.S. imperialism. None of that has changed. None of that has changed. And I'm here, and I consider myself to be a much more experienced, much more knowledgeable, much more in touch with the world, much more clear-headed version of who I was 12 years ago. And that's what I consider myself to be. I consider myself to be just a stronger version of who I was back then. The way I've thought about different things, the way I interact with people has changed, but the overall mission of standing against imperialism, mobilizing the working class, that remains intact. And it's been difficult. And there have been times that it wasn't so easy, but there's been other times where it's been amazing. And I have a feeling that 2023 is going to be a special year. Now, I don't like to get all superstitious, okay? I really don't. I don't like to get superstitious. So forgive me for getting all numerological. Okay? Forgive me. But it is interesting that the day I turned 23 is the day I came to this city. And that, which I thought was only for a month, turned out to be a life-changing day. And that was the day I turned 23. And the first year that I was in this city, which was the year that Occupy Wall Street happened, which was the year of the Arab Spring, which was the year of the Wisconsin, uprising and the labor unions occupying the state capitol. And it was quite a year. But that year was the year that I turned 23. And the year we are now approaching is the year of 2023. And that makes me wonder if the universe is not telling me, just like the year that you yourself, Caleb, turned 23, the year of 2023 is going to be a very, very, very special year for you. And that's something that goes through my mind. I don't know, right? And maybe this is all a little bit too self-reflective, but you're like this too. The only difference between you and me is that you aren't on YouTube talking about it. You're not making yourself vulnerable by talking about it on YouTube. But you're like this too. You pay attention to little patterns in your life that are, in a scientific and logical way, completely meaningless. There is no significance in a logical, scientific way to me being 23 years of age when I moved to New York and this coming year being the year of 2023. There is nothing logical about it, but we all do this. This is called magical thinking. And this is something all of us are guilty of. We all have little weird superstitions in our mind. Just admit it. We do. We all have little head games we play with ourselves. We don't want to admit it, right? In my rational mind, I know there is no logical connection between these two things. But there's part of my mind that's always looking for something deeper, right? You always want to play a little head game with yourself. You always want to be a little superstitious, right? People have fear of the number 13. In New York City, you probably didn't know this, but in New York City, there are no 13th floors. Did you know this? There are no 13th floors. Those big skyscraper buildings, they have floor 12, they have floor 12A, and they have floor 14. Why do you think that is? It's because a lot of people play these silly games in their head. They play these silly games. There's other countries in the world where they have a 13th floor. I bet in China, every building in China has a 13th floor. I'll bet you. And no one thinks anything of it. But in Manhattan, in New York City, and in the United States, we have floor 12, and we have floor 12A, and then we have floor 14, because everyone knows 13 is bad luck. That's not logical. There's no logic to that. But it's a magical thinking. It's magical thinking. It's magical thinking, right? It's a silly thing that we do with our minds. And so I'm guilty of that here. And I'm admitting to you that I'm making some weird association, something completely illogical, some completely illogical association in my head between my age when I moved to the city and the upcoming number of the year. And I know rationally this makes zero sense, right? But we all want to get ahead. And this points to something that I've always been trying to get people to understand. Is that this world is full of chaos. This world is so full of chaos. It can be so scary and so unpredictable. And the only way we human beings have ever been able to draw strength is by trying to conquer the chaos by noticing patterns. By noticing patterns in the universe, we can gain strength. This gives us confidence. This gives us the ability to get through the world. That's why you look at the ancient peoples, the peoples of prehistory. They were always looking at the stars. They were obsessed with constellations. Because that was something that they could look up at. They could notice patterns in the stars. And that primitive man was constantly trying to get some kind of understanding, some kind of edge over nature. Human beings don't want to live at the mercy of nature. They don't. Human beings want to conquer nature. It is the nature of man, as Frederick Engels wrote in his very famous essay. It is the nature of man to assert its will over nature, to force nature to serve him. And human beings are the only species that does this. All other species simply interact with their environment. But man, human beings, are the only species that can force the environment to serve them. And how do we do it? With labor. It's with human labor that we force the environment to serve us. And so this desire to see patterns, right? This desire to see patterns. Wow. Good question. This desire to see patterns is built into us because it's part of our nature. And it is something that gives us the ability to have a level of safety and to further free ourselves from nature. Not be at nature's mercy, assert our humanity. That's one of the beauties of being a human, is our ability to recognize patterns. And furthermore, and this is interesting, according to Freudian psychoanalysis, mental illness of all kinds is rooted in perception of patterns. If we can be completely clear and, and see patterns completely honestly, if we can honestly assess all patterns, we would have no mental illness. But we can't do that. No one can do that. We all bring with us our own perspective, our own experiences, our own biases, our own traumas, our own, we all do that. And that classical psychoanalysis says there's two forms of mental illness. First form of mental illness is what everyone has. Everyone has some form of neurosis. And neurosis is standard normal mental illness, right? Neurosis is not recognizing a pattern that exists. Neurosis is making the same mistakes over and over again. It's being stuck in a cycle, being not able to correct problems in your life. That's neurosis. Addiction is a classic form of neurosis. The person doesn't want to keep drinking. The person doesn't want to keep using drugs. But for whatever reason, they don't have the ability to stop this pattern of using drug use, right? There's other forms. There's patterns in relationships. People who get into abusive relationships over and over because they have a need or a desire in a partner that they're not conscious of. People that can't attach to other people, and they are unwilling, and they're not aware of what that is. And that all of us to some degree or other have some form of neurosis. And the neurosis is simply the inability to recognize patterns, and it's very common, and it's just, not all of us can see every pattern in the most blatant way, though there are some people that are more neurotic than others. Their neurosis makes their life, more and more difficult, and that neurosis can also escalate. And this is where it gets all dialectical. It's that whole quantity into quality thing. There can be a form of neurosis that's limited. But as the problem gets worse and worse and worse, and as the problem gets worse and worse and worse, there becomes a moment where the person has to face it and correct it. And they enter a neurotic crisis of some kind where, the moment, that they're in, they must face their neurosis, right? And they can't deny this pattern any longer, right? And, that's neurosis. And that's based on the inability to recognize patterns. However, there is another form of mental illness, which is much more potent, much more acute, much more serious, and that's called psychosis. And psychosis is the opposite of neurosis. In neurosis, you're not recognizing patterns. In psychosis, you are seeing patterns that are not there. You are inventing false patterns. You are losing touch with reality. And that psychosis is an expression of a huge amount of pain. When a person is in so much pain that reality is just too painful for them to face, and it's just too painful for them to face, they start inventing a false reality. They start believing things about themselves that are not true. They start hearing voices that are not there. And it is their way of protecting themselves from the reality around them. The world around them is just too scary. Just too scary. And so they lose touch with reality, and their mind begins to depart from reality. And psychosis, I must say, is everywhere in our society right now. And it's very sad, and it's very tragic, and, I've been angry at people for so long. There's various people I could get angry with, but, when you see someone who is genuinely psychotic, you can't be angry with them. You just have to love them. And the people that are psychotic, in my limited experience with them, they are they are in a very emotional state. They're generally quite overwhelmed by emotion. That's why they develop the delusion. And they get very worked up and emotional. They start crying. They start yelling if you challenge their delusion. And it's very sad. If you meet someone who's schizophrenic, for example, it's very sad. It's very, very sad. And it is an expression of pain more than anything when someone is psychotic. You know, it is what they are saying to you is, I am in so much pain. I am in so much intense pain that my mind cannot deal with reality anymore. So I'm going to invent some reality that doesn't make any sense. And it's very, very sad. And that is going on all around us. We're seeing that everywhere. I mean, the streets of New York City are full of people like that. You know, and there's a lot of people that are not homeless. I'll just tell you this story. Right? This was a lesson for me. Right? One thing that I used to do a lot of, I still do it occasionally, but you know, I used to do it a lot, was I used to do vox pops on the street. I would interview people on the street. You know, and I would stand on a street corner and say, answer a question for the news. And people would stop and say, what do you think of Donald Trump's policy? You know, and ask them, you know, answer a question for the news. What do you think of the price of gasoline? I would just do a lot of those, you know, and you talk to 10 or 11, 12 people, you know, you get some comments. It's called vox pops, right? You know, it's where you interview. It's like man on the street interviews. I would do these in Manhattan, right? I would do them in like the 42nd Street area. And one thing that I would see so often, I saw this every single time I went out. I saw this at least once. Sometimes it was very scary. Other times it was just random. Is I would see this person, and there's a name for this, but I'll just describe it first. I would be standing there on the street, me and my cameraman, we'd be there. I'd be saying, answer a question for the news. And most people just walk by you or say, no, I'm not interested. But some people stop and give their opinion. But I would see this so often, like every day I would see this. I would walk by and then somebody would say, why are you following me? Why are you guys always following me? I saw you down on that street. You were down there with the camera. And then and these people would believe that I was like stalking them with the camera. I would say, I'm not following you. We're standing here on the street corner. We're asking every single person. We're not filming. We don't start filming until you tell us we can film. We don't approach children. We don't approach anyone who looks like they might be disabled. We're just. But this is a really, really common delusion. It actually has a Wikipedia page. It's called the Truman Show delusion. And there were many, many people who would see me standing there on the street corner with my cameraman next to me saying, hey, does anyone want to answer a question for the news? Does anyone want to answer a question for the news? And they would see that and they would jump. And then they would unload on me this delusion that they were being followed by camera crews everywhere they went. It's called the Truman Show delusion. It's the belief that your life is actually a television show, that you're a celebrity and you don't know about it. It's really sad. And the people who would have this delusion were not always homeless. Yet some of them were homeless people. Not all of them. A lot of older women, a lot of wealthier women older women would have this delusion. You know, they'd be wearing the furs, fancy fur coat, walking to their apartment, older. They probably live alone. Maybe they're divorced. Maybe their husband's deceased. A number of older women that looked like they were maybe getting ready for the Alzheimer's or whatever. They would see me and my cameraman standing there with the microphone, and I would say, answer a question for the news. Why are you guys always following me? Oh my God, everywhere I go, you guys are following me. Oh, and I'm just like, I'm not following you. I have no idea who you are. I'm just standing here asking every single person who goes by a question. But so many people have this delusion, the Truman Show delusion, it's called. And I saw that, and I mean, it was scary. And it was sad, and it made me feel sad for them. And New York, Manhattan, there's a lot of people who used to work in the performing arts. A lot A lot of old actors, a lot of old Broadway people, a lot of old musicians. And maybe this person, maybe they were a celebrity at one point. Maybe they were famous 50 years ago. That's how they can afford to live in Manhattan and wear a big, long coat. And then I think about the fact that, maybe it didn't work out, right? Maybe they were famous for 10 minutes and then they stopped being famous. Now they have their Manhattan apartment. They live alone. And if you think about it, this Truman Show delusion, this belief that everyone's following them around, it probably protects them from the sad reality that they were only famous for 10 minutes. And that's really sad, right? Or maybe it just protects them from the fact that they're lonely. They're old and they're lonely. They live alone in an apartment in Manhattan. And it's really, really, really sad. It's really, 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 really sad. And I saw all the time on the streets of New York City, every day, I would see at least one person at the Truman Show delusion. Every single day. And it was really, really tragic, and there's part of me, obviously I wouldn't do this, there's part of me that would, wishes I could just give all of those people a hug and say, wow, man, I'm sorry. But of course, that would be like the scariest thing in the world, right? They already think I'm stalking them. So, I'm obviously not going to do that. But, it's a really, really sad thing. And, it's holiday season. And in holiday season, it's important to be thankful for what you have. It's important to be thankful for what you have. But it's also really important to not hate those who are having a rough time. Because that's a really, really common trap that people fall into. Right? It's a way to protect themselves from feelings of empathy, is they try to blame the person. Well, they must have done something, or they must be stupid, or they must be, no. These people that are suffering from this kind of mental illness, there but for the grace of God go I. That could be any of us. For whatever reason, they are under so much stress that they have departed from reality. And they're in that much pain that their way of dealing with that pain is to depart from reality. And when someone's in that much pain and they're suffering that much that they have to depart from reality, how can you do anything but feel sympathy for them? How can you do anything but feel sympathy for a person that develops that kind of way of being? How you have to just have empathy for them. And I feel like if people had more empathy, there would be less people like that. It's almost like a dog chasing its tail, but it's like if we had a society where people were more empathetic and people cared about each other more, where older people weren't just alone in their apartment in New York, they got visited by their relatives, where people's value wasn't determined by how many Twitter followers they have or how much money they had in their bank account, but how much they cared about other people and how much they did the right thing. If we had a society where people felt an obligation to help one another more than they felt an obligation to make money, we lived in a society where compassion and kindness wasn't viewed as a weakness, but rather viewed as an upstanding character trait, I feel like there'd be less people walking around like that. There would be a lot less people like that. And that the reality is that human beings are a collective species. The nature of our collectivism changes. And yes, we are individuals as well. And we all have an individualist drive. We all have our own individual mind, etc. But human beings are collective in nature. For most of our history, we were tribal. And we've always been collective. Everything, this pen in my hand is probably the result of the combined work of thousands and thousands of people who came together and made this pen. Human beings, everything human beings have achieved, they've achieved together, cooperatively. But yet we live in an age where the rallying cry is individualism above all else. And it's leading us into a society-wide crisis because people want to belong. They want ideology, so they know why they're there, why they're waking up in the morning, what it is that they're struggling for, where they came from, where they're going. They want to be part of a group, of a community, of a nation, of a religion, of a culture, of a family. People want to be part of groups. That's how they identify themselves. The way you think about yourself is largely based on the way people in your life react to you. And human beings are collective in nature. That collectivism certainly changes. Competition certainly goes on. We don't deny any of this. But everything that humankind has been achieved collectively. But the rulers of our society have embraced what Lukács called philosophical irrationalism, radical individualism. And this nightmare, liberalism, Nietzschean thought, Randian thought, this is corroding our society. And it's leading us to an even greater crisis. And so I just wanted to put that forward here tonight and help us to all think about this. Be thankful for what you have, but also recognize that we're heading toward a big moment. We're heading toward one of those quantity into quality, quality into quantity moments, where the trend that exists, the neurosis of our society, and the extreme individualism, and the disregard for the collective need, the lack of group identity is going to hit a rock bottom. There's going to become a moment. There's going to become a moment where we realize, as a society, that if we don't give up this individualism, we're all going to die together. There's going to be a moment where the crisis will become intense enough that people are forced. I will remind you, the Communist Manifesto is a great book, and there are so many sentences in the Communist Manifesto that are so important. And I will remind you of what the Communist Manifesto says. This is an important quote, and it's often mistranslated. This is what it says. It says, the growing competition among the bourgeois and the resulting commercial crises make the wages of the workers ever more fluctuating. The increasing improvement of machinery, ever more rapidly developing, makes the livelihood more precarious. The corrosions between the individual workman and the individual bourgeois take more and more the character of a collision between two classes. Thereupon, the workers begin to form combinations. They club together in order to keep up the rate of wages. They form permanent associations in order to make provisions beforehand. These occasional revolts, here and there, the contest breaks into riots. Now, most translations of the Communist Manifesto, they read this sentence, thereupon, workers begin to form combinations, and then afterwards it says in parenthesis, trade unions. Now, I maintain that that translation is not correct. First of all, even the name, even the word trade unions is not correct, because there is a big difference between a trade union and a labor union. Did you know this? All right? Trade unions, those refer to craft unions with an apprenticeship. The plumbers union is a trade union. The electricians union is a trade union. But the auto workers union is a labor union, right? You don't have to have an apprenticeship to be an auto worker. You have to have some orientation, but you don't have to go through an apprenticeship. You don't have to, that's not how it works, right? So even the term trade unions there is not correct, because workers on the assembly line coming together to assert their needs is not a trade union. A trade union is a guild, right? It's a labor union. So even that is not correct. But I don't think when Karl Marx wrote, thereupon the workers begin to form combinations, he meant only trade unions. Trade unions are one form. Labor unions are one form of what Marx was talking about. But what he was writing is this process that we have seen play out in our lifetime. The competition among the capitalists resulting in commercial crises. They make the wages ever more fluctuating. The increasing improvement of machinery, the development of technology, makes the livelihood of the worker more and more precarious, right? Jobs are eliminated by technology. The collision between the individual worker and the individual capitalist take more and more the character of collisions between two classes. You start to realize that it's not just you who's getting screwed over by your boss. It's not just you who's getting poverty wages. It's the whole system, and it's the 99% versus the 1%. So thereupon, the workers form combinations against the bourgeois, and they club together in order to keep up the rate of wages. They club together. They form a club, an association. They club together in order to demand higher wages. But not only that, they found permanent associations in order to make provision for occasional revolts. Here and there, the contests break into riots. And now and then, the workers are victorious, but only for a time. The real fruit of their battle lies not in the immediate result, but in the ever-expanding union of workers. This union is helped on by the improved means of communication created by modern industry and the place the workers of different localities are in contact with each other. And it is just this contact that is needed to centralize the numerous local struggles of all the same character into one national struggle between classes. But every class struggle is a political struggle, and that union, to attain which the burghers of the Middle Ages and the miserable highways required centuries ago, the modern proletarian, thanks to the railway, achieves in a few years. This organization of the proletarians into a class, and consequently into a political party, is continually being upset by the competition between workers themselves. But it ever rises up again, stronger, firmer, and mightier. It compels legislative recognition of particular interests of the workers by taking advantage of the divisions among the bourgeois itself. Thus, the 10 Hours Bill in England was carried. After the collision between the classes of the old society further, in many ways, the course of the development of the proletariat. The bourgeois finds itself involved in a constant battle, at first with the aristocracy, later on with those portions of the bourgeois itself whose interests have become antagonistic to the progress of industry, at the time with the bourgeois of foreign countries. In all of these battles, it sees itself compelled to appeal to the proletariat, to ask for help, and thus drag it into the political arena. The bourgeoisie itself, therefore, supplies the proletariat with its own elements of political education. In other words, it furnishes the proletariat with weapons for fighting the bourgeoisie. What did Karl Marx just say there? In the battles that the bourgeoisie is fighting among themselves, and in the battles with foreign countries, they are forced to appeal to the proletariat and ask for help and drag the proletariat into the political arena. In doing so, they supply the proletariat with elements of political and general education, furnishing the proletariat with weapons for fighting the bourgeoisie. That's exactly what I've been telling you all about on these streams. As the crisis intensifies, the capitalists fight with one another, and they battle against each other. And they fight with each other, and in doing so, they recruit the workers to be their foot soldiers, and they draw the workers into the political process. And as that happens, the working class awakens and becomes more and more conscious. And the fights among the capitalists that draw the workers into the political arena lay the basis for the proletariat eventually working in its own interest, overthrowing the capitalist class. So the reason I'm always on here talking about Bonapartism The reason I'm on here talking about divisions in the bourgeoisie is because that is what has always laid the basis for the class struggle. So those are just some final notes here. And that's how I'll end my opening remarks for tonight. It was kind of an interesting wander. We wandered around interesting territory. We talked about psychoanalysis. We talked about me moving to the city. We talked about communism and Marxism. There you go. The combinations are coming, I guess. That's what I'll say. There's going to come a time where organizing on the internet, live streaming isn't going to be enough. There's going to come a time where we're going to need real communities of solidarity. And we're ahead of the game with the Center for Political Innovation. We're building real communities of solidarity. We're building a real community here. We may not be able to whiz-bang the ruling class, but we're going to build a real community. And when the moment comes where people are desperate for real communities, we're going to already have one. So there you go. Those are my opening remarks for tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I've got some super chats to answer here, but let's do our roll call. Let's do our roll call. Names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Yeah. There, names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? We got JT24 in Mississippi. We got Nate from Chicago. We got Broadine Thunderbunk in Cumming, Georgia. JT24. St. David's, Bermuda. 117. Put it on my dog tags. I don't know what that means. Killian in Milwaukee. Elizabeth in Portland. Zachary Brunch. Kieran from San Diego. Welcome, Kieran. Timoshenko. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Tom G in Switzerland. Wales, UK. Caleb, Mr. Wonderful from Captain Kronos. Orange County, Molly McGuire. Auckland, New Zealand. Cedar Park, Texas. Gabby from Chicago. Contra Costa, California. Heidi from Edinburgh, Scotland. Alex from Brazil. Don from Quebec. Anthony from Detroit. Briggy from PA. Happy birthday, Bob Troy from New York. San Diego. We got Mason in Texas. Barrett Mason. We got Patch in Arizona. San Diego County. Scott. We got Home for the Holidays. We got Chris in Salt Lake City. We got MD, Maryland. Potato Biden. Right? We got Fouquet, Scotland. We got the Ragin' Cajun in Woodlands, Texas. Welcome, 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 welcome. Happy birthday. We got San Diego County. Comrade Robert is wishing me a happy birthday. We got the LA Gulag. We got RC in Conopcion, Chile. Joshua Tree Kinky, longtime friend of our show here. Micah from Las Vegas. Jerry Teller in Germany. QC in LA. Jorshed and Vlad in Chicago. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Christina from Portland. Welcome, Christina. Happy 35th birthday. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get out to the Pacific Northwest, by the way. That's my next stop. I'm not sure of the dates, but that'll be where I head after we do our East Coast conference this spring. Then we'll figure out an event on the Pacific Northwest. That's the next place we want to do an event. Telling you, Texas going to go blue. Ryan in Kansas City. There we go. There we go. There we go. Anyone else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Oh, happy birthday. The Cubans, Battle of Santa Clara victory. Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. And that's an important event in Cuban history, right? If anyone watching in the Rockfin, I see there's a few of you watching in the Rockfin. There's 7 of you. If you want to, if some of the Rockfin people want to make themselves known, feel free. I'll try to call you out as I see you. But there you go. There you go. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And I guess, yeah, I guess we'll start answering super chat questions here. I guess let me look at something real quick on my phone. Something happened on my phone, and I just want to take a look at it. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Yeah, just looking at my phone here, and there you go. All right. So now we're going to start answering super chat questions. First super chat question is, what amendments would have to be added to the U.S. Constitution to change the relationship of property and allow for socialist development? That's an interesting question. And the reason that's an interesting question is there is a vehicle in the U.S. Constitution that allows for the government to seize private property. Don't tell anyone in the Tea Party that, right? The Tea Party people are like, there's nothing in the Constitution that lets the government take private property. Actually, there is. There is something in the Constitution that says the government can take private property, and it's called eminent domain. And that is in the Constitution. It is called eminent domain. Eminent domain. And it is the process by which the government may seize private property. Eminent domain. Land acquisition, compulsory purchase. The government can seize your property in the U.S. Constitution. It is in the law. I believe the U.S. Constitution specifically says, right, that it says the person who has their property seized by the government must receive just compensation from the government for their property. But under the U.S. Constitution, the federal government and state and local governments have the right to seize private property. And there have been some particularly wild court rulings about it. There was a Supreme Court ruling that said that a city can seize property even if the only reason they want to seize it is because it will increase tax revenue. I believe what happened was there was some town where the government seized a bunch of people's private property in order to build a mall because they would get more tax money from this mall. And the people said, that's not a reason to seize private property. You can't just seize our homes and kick us out of our homes. You can't just do that, in exchange, just to build a super mall, usually eminent domain is used to build roads, to build bridges, etc. But apparently, there have been many parts of the country where they have seized private property in order to build private property for someone else. And the Supreme Court said you can do that, right? So already under the U.S. law, we could nationalize, if we argued it was in the public interest, we could nationalize Rockefeller Standard Oil. We could nationalize Amazon, right? We could nationalize all these things. We could seize the shares under U.S. law as long as we paid for them out of the public budget, right? As long as they were paid for, we could do it. So there's that. Also, one mechanism through which the property of the capitalists could be seized would be to be charging them with a crime. Right? If we had some kind of revolutionary government that was in power, and we started charging capitalists for the crimes they committed around the world, their property could be seized as part of a criminal proceeding, and they wouldn't have to be compensated. For example, right? The military-industrial complex. We proved that they had lobbied to get the USA into a war. And they had lobbied and they'd pressed to, to subvert the U.S. political process in order to get Americans into a war based on lies. The government could carry out a criminal proceeding against the military-industrial complex and nationalize their property. There are loopholes that exist under the U.S. Constitution currently, as it exists, that would enable state control of the means of production. Now, that said, right, that the Supreme Court has generally overturned various socialistic measures under the right to privacy. That's been generally the way that they've argued that you have the right to privacy, meaning the right to your business, right? That's the right to an abortion, right? Is that the government doesn't have the right to tell a woman she can't get an abortion because there's no legal basis for proving that fetus is a life, etc. So under her right to privacy, it's her body. If you want to paint your nails black, you can. If you want to abort your fetus, you can, right? And that generally it's understood to be right to privacy. One thing I don't know if folks remembered that Obamacare got not overturned. The Supreme Court ruled it was legal. Right? When it went to court, Obamacare was challenged at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said it was legal. And the basis of the challenge to Obamacare, I actually thought, and this is, again, I'm a socialist here. I'm a Marxist, and I'm telling you that there was some basis So there was some basis to the challenge to Obamacare, which was the mandate. The mandate, right? And this is the thing. Republicans invented the mandate. George W. Bush, when he was president, Republicans, Democrats, we all realized that healthcare in America is a nightmare, right? People don't get the healthcare they need. We pay out the ass for healthcare, the health insurance ripoff scheme. It's a nightmare, right? Healthcare is a nightmare in America. So George W. Bush came out with this idea. I am going to make healthcare. President George W. Bush, going to make healthcare. I'm going to solve the problem of healthcare in America. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to create a mandate. It will be the law that you must get healthcare. And that will make healthcare universal. It is the dumbest idea ever, which is, under the law, you are required to buy something. That is not the same as the government giving everyone healthcare at all. It is not the same thing. Right? I mean, it's like, if the government makes it a law that you have to buy something, that is not the government giving it to you. Right? And I don't get how these people think that's socialism. Right? It's like, you could solve hunger. It is now illegal for anyone not to eat. If you do not eat, it is against the law and you go to jail for not eating. See, I solved the problem of hunger. There's no more hunger in America. It's illegal. It's illegal. It's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. It is the healthcare mandate is the stupidest thing I ever heard, right? I mean, you could solve all the problems, right? I mean, depression. It is now illegal for you to be depressed. If you are depressed, you go to jail. It's illegal. See, America no longer has any depression. Anyone here depressed? Well, I am, sir. Oh, drag him to jail. See, we have now solved depression in America. It is illegal. I mean, it's the dumbest thing. You can solve all social problems by making them illegal. I mean, it's like, so Bush came out with this stupid idea called the healthcare mandate. We will require all Americans to buy healthcare. And if they don't, they'll get a fine in their taxes. Right? That was Bush. And it didn't pass because people are just like, that's stupid. That's stupid. No, it took a Democrat to do it. And that was a big part of Obamacare. And that was the part that went to the Supreme Court. The government can't force you to buy a product. Right? And their argument was right to privacy. If you don't want to buy apples, the government has no right to make you buy an apple. If you don't want to buy a house, the government has no right to make you buy a house. If you don't want to buy a car, the government has no right to make you buy a car. So why in the world did Obama, as president, say he was going to require everyone to get health insurance? That would be different if he provided health insurance to everybody. That, we had a single payer system where everyone was insured as a result of being a citizen. That would be one thing. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. No. They passed the mandate, and that was a big part of Obamacare. All Americans, you are now required to have health insurance. And if you don't have it, you pay a $1,000 fine in your taxes. It's the dumbest thing ever. And the fact that Republicans challenge that in court, I think it's fine. Provide health care to people. Provide health care to people. But don't make a law. Don't keep it as it is. And the thing is, the way Obamacare was set up, the prices of health insurance remained really, really high. People were still being charged out the ass. They just got punished in their taxes for not buying it. So how in the world is that socialism? Right? I'm sorry, the government now requires you to buy products from a private company. It lets the private company continue charging you ridiculous rates and making astronomical profits off of it. How is that socialism? That's not socialism, right? And it's a violation of your privacy right. And I'm with the Republicans on that, right? If they're not going to force drug companies and insurance companies to lower the costs, if they're not going to provide decent health insurance to the public, what business of theirs is it to punish you with a fine in your taxes for not buying it? That's ridiculous. What's next? Are the auto companies going to say, President Obama, make a law that if you don't buy a car, you get fined the cost of a car in your taxes? That's stupid, right? They're going to make everyone who doesn't buy shoes, if you don't buy at least 10 pairs of shoes this year, you get fined the cost of 10 pairs of shoes in your taxes. It's stupid. It's really, really stupid. The health insurance mandate is bullshit. But they got away with it. The Supreme Court said, oh, you can do it, right? And that car insurance is allowed. And the reason car insurance is mandated, the idea is that if you're driving, you could potentially, with your car, do damage to someone else's car. And if you're not insured, no one else will pay for it. So the idea is that you have to be insured for the sake of the other drivers. It's not for you, right? If you wreck your car and you can't pay for it, they don't care about that. But the idea is with your car, you could wreck somebody else's car, and there has to be somebody who will pay out. There has to be somebody who will pay out insurance. So that's a little bit different, but there you go. But anyway, I digress. But, I feel like an economic bill of rights that stipulates that all Americans have the right to a job, the right to health care, the right to education. An economic bill of rights would be a good thing, right? And that's what Roosevelt proposed. And you can read the economic bill of rights that Roosevelt proposed. Let's pull it up here, right? He proposed, just like we have the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, he proposed another set of amendments, economic bill of rights that Roosevelt proposed for all Americans. FDR's economic bill of rights. Second bill of rights, he called it, right? And it would be the right to employment, the right to adequate food, income, or shelter, farmers' right to a fair income, freedom from unfair competition, decent housing, adequate medical care, Social Security, and education. That is the second Bill of Rights, or the Economic Bill of Rights, that Roosevelt proposed. I think that's great. And I think, in order to have socialism in the United States, you would have to pass something like the second Bill of Rights. You would have to do that, because if you didn't, it wouldn't, there would be some kind of constitutional challenge. Generally, and thank you, David. Thank you, and Happy New Year. Generally, the reason you make constitutional amendments nowadays is because the Supreme Court won't allow something. That's why you make constitutional amendments, right? Is that the courts say that something isn't allowed, so you go around them and you make a constitutional amendment. That's generally why these things happen. So, in order to make sure that some court didn't overturn the right to a job, the right to healthcare or something, we would obviously have to pass some kind of economic bill of rights. That's how these things work. All right. Why are fascists so into the occult? Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Right? I thought all Christians were fascists, right? I thought fascists were all Christians, and that's why we need to hate Christians, and Christians are all fascists. I'm being facetious, of course. I'm being humorous, but no, in pre-World War II Europe, the centrist position was Christianity. Most European countries had a state religion. In Britain, the Anglican Church, the Church of England, that was the state religion. France, Catholicism was the state religion, I believe. In Germany, the country was half Lutheran and half Catholic, depending on what region you were in. Spain was Catholic. Italy was Catholic. These countries had state religions, and that was the mainstream view. The schools pushed the state religion. They recognized to some degree or other some form of religious freedom usually, but they had a state religion that was Christianity. And that was the mainstream view. It was kind of assumed everyone was that. Communists were atheists. Communists tended to believe in dialectical and historical materialism. They tended to believe religion was a tool of the bourgeoisie to oppress the workers. They pushed, dialectical and historical materialism and atheism. Occultism was an obsession of the right wing. And that gets obscured nowadays. People forget that. But the occult is generally a right-wing phenomenon historically, and even up to today. If you look at the essence of most of the occult pagan groups, what they believe is more or less right-wing. Even though the 1960s left, right, would have you believe that paganism and the occult is all left-wing and revolutionary. If you look at the essence of what most occultist groups believe, it is right-wing. For example, probably the biggest form of occultism in America is called, it's Thelema, right? I forget, it's OTO, the order, some Thelema. Started by Aleister Crowley. It's a religion started by Aleister Crowley, the occultist guru from Britain. It's libertarianism. It's the belief, it's chaos magic, libertarianism, to thy, what is it? do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It's libertarianism. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's and it's all about helping you find your individual strength, about nonconformity, about sexual freedom. It's religious libertarianism. And I debated a big libertarian, Augustus Sol Invictus, and he was a Thelemite, right? And I believe one of the heads of one of the big names of the Thelemite society, he's also like a best-selling author who's associated with the Libertarian Party. Thelema, Aleister Crowley, that kind of stuff, that's all libertarianism. It's right wing. It's not leftist in any conceivable way. It might be socially liberal, right? They're all about, sex and stuff like that. But economically, it's a defense of the rich and powerful. It's an opposition to any form of socialism. There you go. The Church of Satan, right? That's another big occult movement in the United States, right? I don't know how big it really was, but it got a lot of press at the time. Right? It got a lot of press at the time. The Church of Satan, they promote the writings of Ayn Rand. They say that they are based on libertarian objectivism and Ayn Rand's teachings. If you read the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, if you read the writings of the Church of Satan, it's all about free market capitalism is great. Compassion and empathy are forms of weakness. Do whatever you want. No one can tell you what to do. Human beings are just animals. Well, there's a quote. What is it? It's death to the weak and wealth to the strong. I mean, that's not left wing. That's not socialist in any conceivable way. There's nothing socialistic about that stuff. If you go down the line, most of the occultist stuff, in one way or another, is right wing. There are some exceptions. There is some Wiccan circles that are feminist in their orientation, and that they have a positive view of socialism. And I saw that when I was in Cleveland. Some of the activist women that I knew, they were involved in some of the Wiccan stuff, and some of that was socialistic, and that they glorified the matriarchy that predated patriarchy. And they talked about how under primitive communism, women were equal to men, and women were honored for their role as procreators and healers. And, there's some Wiccan stuff that is pagan that has like a socialistic, anti-capitalist edge to it. Okay. There's some of that, but not much. I'm trying to think one of the big occult movements in the United States is called the Mighty I Am, or I Am Activity. And I was actually reading about this because I was fascinated, right? It's a group of people that they believe in something called divine master teaching or something. And that they worship the mountain, Mount Shasta in California. There's a mountain, and they believe that this mountain, Mount Shasta, is where God is located. And they were like fascists, they were tied in with Hitler and stuff. One of the big Nazis in the United States, William Dudley Pelley, right? He started out as an occultist. He started out as an occultist guru who was into spiritualism and talking to the dead and all of that. And he got into politics as a white supremacist, and that a lot of that occult stuff, a lot of that is very, very right wing. And it's the belief that we've gotten away from the ancient ways. There was this primitive ancient way. There was this primitive, the great human beings were great. And then we got away from our greatness somehow. And that through ritual and through going back to nature and through not using technology, and we can somehow get back to our greatness. If you read Julius Evola, one of the, he was a thinker in Italy who the Italian fascists really promoted. He eventually left Italy because he thought they weren't fascist enough, and he moved to Nazi Germany. And he was just this big far right intellectual. I read two of his books, Man Among Ruins and Revolt Against Civilization, right? Yeah, exactly. Wicca tends to be anti-growth, right? They all have this primitivism about them, right? I read Man Among Ruins. I read Revolt Against the Modern World by Julius Evola. And it's all about how we need to get back to the great original way that in ancient times, before human beings had those evil machines, they were living a glorious egalitarian life in which they worshiped Mother Earth. And then they believed in technology, and that ruined everything. And we need to get back. I mean, that a lot of occult stuff is very much focused on, individualism, libertarianism, primitivism, rejection of the modern world, and glorification of the past, of feudalism, stuff like that. A lot of that stuff. But within everything there are, there are always layers, and there's always confusion, and there's always layers to everything. Let me just put it that way. There's always layers to everything. Buddhism, for example, right? I mean, Buddhism as a religion, the way people interpret it in the West, in the United States, is very different from the way people interpret it in Asia. It's very different. And people get angry when I say this, but the way we understand karma in the West is that, kind of what goes around comes around. If you keep a good attitude, you treat people nice, people are going to treat you nice. If you put out into the universe good energy will come back to you, etc. And that's, to some degree or other, that is in Buddhism. That's what people believe. However, in Tibet, the way they interpreted Buddhism was that if you were born a serf, you deserved it. You must have done something in a past life to deserve to be a serf. And so instead of trying to correct that and, make equality exist, you should just be a really good, obedient serf so that when you die, maybe you'll get promoted to be a monk. And I mean, Christianity, I find Christianity to be very revolutionary. And I talk about the origins of Christianity. I consider communism and Christianity to be of the same vein, the proletarian movement, etc. But I'll be honest with you, the way Christianity was interpreted in medieval Europe in feudalism was a lot like how Buddhism was interpreted in Tibet. It wasn't, the last shall be free. It was be a good person, be humble in this life, follow all the rules, obey the government, obey the feudal order, and in the next life, you'll be meek, and the meek shall inherit the earth. You'll be rewarded in the next life. And that was how the feudal Catholic Church and the feudal societies, that's how they justified things in the name of Christianity, right? And that these ideologies, these religions, you can use them to justify different things, right? I mean, look, Vosch thinks he's a socialist, right? He reads Marx to somehow think that arming Ukrainian Nazis is great and that all socialism is an employee stock ownership program, right? I mean, and he uses the same books I use, but he misinterprets them and he changes them. But his interpretation gets so widely promoted because the power structure wants to hear it, right? And that's how these things work. I would argue that the way the Catholic Church was interpreting the Bible and the teachings of Jesus in the time of the Dark Ages was a distortion. But the feudal order had the money and had the power. You might argue that the way the Tibetan hierarchy and the Dalai Lama was interpreting Buddhism until, in the 1920s and 30s, you might argue that was not correct, but they had the power. And it's, Karl Marx said that the ruling ideology of every epoch is the ideology of the ruling class, meaning those who control the means of production, those who control the economy, those who sit at the top of the social order, they get the license to interpret religion, to interpret ideology, and to see things from their perspective. Michael Parenti wrote a very good and very short book on this topic called The Culture Struggle. During the time of slavery, early psychologists thought slaves wanting to be free was a form of mental illness. Did you know this? They even had a name for it. And there were these people that were psychologists, and they would study slaves who just wanted freedom and just didn't want to be slaves anymore. And it was considered mental illness. Mental illness. Why would anyone not want to be a slave? And clearly, and there was actually a name for a form of mental illness that slaves would have to not want to be slaves anymore. Sounds too laughable to be true. Sounds too laughable to be true, but it is, right? The term nymphomaniac, we hear that word now. It's like a woman who's like sex obsessed or whatever. That was a term for if a woman wasn't sexually satisfied by her husband, right? If she was cheating on her husband, she went outside the marriage to get sexual satisfaction. Clearly, she must be mentally ill. So we have this name for it. And a lot of mental illnesses, because the ruling class psychology was theirs to interpret. And, and so they, the ruling order said that women should be only loyal to their husband. So if a woman wasn't sexually satisfied by her husband, she must have some kind of mental illness. She must be a nymphomaniac. And so, if a slave wants to be free, he must be mentally ill, because why would anyone not want to be a slave? It's his natural place in the slave system, right? This is the way the social order has license to interpret everything. And that people get all fired up when you say this, but this is why we can't just believe science, right? And this is one thing that annoys me. People say during the pandemic, especially, Caleb, don't you believe in science? Science is not a religion. If you know anything about science, the first thing about science is that you're never supposed to blindly believe in science. The second you're supposed to blindly believe in something, it stops being science. Science defines itself as the search for truth and constantly looking to falsify hypotheses. Scientific method, by definition, is not something you blindly believe in. So when people are like, Caleb, do you not believe in science? If I'm supposed to believe in it, it's not science. Science does not ask for belief. Belief is religion. Belief is philosophy. Belief is ideology, politics. Science does not ask for your belief. It does not ask for your belief. And it just doesn't. Science does not ask for your belief. And unfortunately, it is just a fact that while science works really, really, really hard, and it's true, scientists work really, really hard to put their bias aside, and they deserve credit for that. And there are all kinds of, blind tests and blind studies. Scientists work really, really hard to put their biases aside. That's true. But there's so many examples of bias slipping into science. All right. What do you think racial pseudoscience was? What do you think eugenics was? Okay. What do you think all the scientists during the Cold War that did experiments to prove that communism was the worst system ever? What do you think that was? There's so many examples of science being distorted to serve certain political agendas for those in power. To be fair, science does work really, really hard to prevent that. It does. But it still exists. And so if you're asking me to believe in science, first of all, you've stopped being scientific at that point. And then we can just go over all the history of things that science used to believe that now they don't believe. Quantum theory, there's all kinds of things. Physics has changed. Science is constantly changing, right? It's constantly throwing out old beliefs, replacing them with new beliefs. So if you're asking me to blindly believe in science, I'm believing in something that's constantly changing. The flat earth. Yeah, right. Don't you believe in science? The earth is flat. It clearly is. Well, what? You don't believe in science? Well, no, I just don't believe in the science from the year 1000. I believe in the science from the year 2022 that says the earth is round. But I guess, are you denying science from thousands of years ago? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. It's just, and the fact that they've made this a thing, right? And the new atheists, they kind of started this, but it's this thing. Now we all have to believe in science. And if you have certain positions, that means you don't believe in science. And it's like, science doesn't believe in itself. So why am I supposed to believe in science? I will listen to science. I respect the scientific community. I'm not ready to say there's no man-made global warming because it looks to me like it is. And I know the majority of the scientific community says there is. So I'm not in a position to say there's no man-made global warming. I have my doubts, honestly, because I see how it's being used. But just because something's being used for bad purposes doesn't mean it's not true. Right? Something can be true and be used, to justify a bad agenda. So I'm not ready to say. There are good friends of mine who I respect that say to me, Caleb, man-made global warming is a myth. And part of me wants to believe them. because I just see how evil this degrowth stuff is. I see how evil the anti-fossil fuels, anti-growth agenda is, and how evil and satanic the historical pessimism these people are pushing is. But I'm not ready to say, oh, and all the scientists around the world are wrong and I'm right, because I'm not a scientist. And if you put me in a room with a climate scientist, I would not be able to win an argument against them. I don't know two shits about it. I don't know anything about climate science. And I know that, so that's why I will never deny man-made global warming, because I don't feel qualified to do so. I know there is a minority of scientists who do, and I respect their right to do it, but I will never do that because I'm not a scientist, right? And so is that me believing in science? No, it's just me saying that I don't have the confidence with my lack of knowledge of science to go against the prevailing view in the scientific community. I'm just not going to do that, right? I might emotionally have a desire to feel that way. I know that degrowth is dangerous. I know that pessimism is dangerous. I know that, if fossil fuels is creating global warming, then the answer is obviously to move to a higher form of energy, nuclear fusion, right? Fusion energy, but they never want to talk about that. But, I'm not ready to just say that all these scientists are completely wrong, because I'm not a scientist, right? I will say this. I'll throw this out there and then we'll move. If anyone has any more super chats, by the way, please bring them along, right? We're having a great live stream here, talking about all kinds of stuff. But I will say this. I'll just throw this out there. There are some scientific debates that we don't hear about in the United States that are big among communists. There are communists that have divergent views of science, and there are people in the third world and in the anti-imperialist countries that have divergent views of science that we never hear about. Not climate change, not that. That's what we're arguing about in the United States. The lower level capitalists say that climate change isn't real because they don't want environmental regulations. The higher level capitalists, they say climate change is real and they have to have environmental regulations, and they're the ones that get to write them, and they get to, but that's the debate we're having here. There's climate change. That's the big debate. There are some debates that go on in the third world that are quite interesting, and I don't know enough about them. Do not ask me for an opinion on them. But, there are two people I know in the United States who are communists, two of them, who have a view of physics that is widespread. I understand that, like in India, there are a lot of communists in Africa who believe this. There are a lot of communists in China who believe this. They believe that the Big Bang never happened. There's actually a book that I met him once, Dr. Eric Lerner, who is the head of the Fusion Energy Research Center of New Jersey, a well-respected physicist. And Dr. Eric Lerner maintains that the Big Bang is bullshit, and that the Big Bang never happened, and that what he calls the new physics is an attempt to insert religion into science, and that the Big Bang never happened. And Mike Gimbel, who used to be a member of the Workers' World Party, he's like a math genius. He's a very nice man, a very kind man, he's a statistical genius. He also believes this. And he wrote a book called Dialectical Materialism versus the New Physics, making the same argument. I don't know heads or tails about physics, and that is not the hill I want to die on. All right. It's not the hill I want to die on. I'll write it down. All right. That's not the hill I want to die on. Not the hill I want to die on. And I don't know anything about physics. The other thing is AIDS. Right? There are a number of people in the third world who argue that the science around AIDS is also malarkey. And I don't even know where to begin on that. But they argue that, that AIDS spreading so rapidly in Africa is not because Africans are having unprotected sex. There's more to it than that. And that they argue that it's related to countries not having proper infrastructure, and that they argue that something about the AIDS epidemic is being covered up, and that there's a lot. And I don't know. Again, do I look like a germ biologist? No. Do I look like somebody who knows anything about that? No. Right. So there are people around the world that are anti-imperialists that believe that the way we understand AIDS as a sexually transmitted disease, and that's all there is to it, that there's actually something more to it than that. And the reason it spread in certain African countries is not because people were just having sexually transmitted diseases, having sex. There's more to it than that, that it was related to a lack of infrastructure and there's certain societal conditions. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. But there's some people that maintain that the AIDS stuff is not, I don't know anything about that. I really don't know anything about it. So, and I understand that actually the book that was written by Robert Kennedy about Dr. Fauci gets into some of that. It gets into some of the questions about the AIDS epidemic and the science behind it. So I really don't know anything about it. But anyway, that's all I'll say about that. So, there are debates in the scientific community, and who knows, maybe 40 years from now, we'll hear that, yeah, the new physics was bullshit, or yeah, they were wrong about the way AIDS is spread, or something. I don't know. I have no idea. And I stay out of that stuff because I'm not a scientist. All right. I'm into politics. I can answer your questions about Lenin and Trotsky. I can answer your question about economics, but I cannot answer your question about AIDS and about the new physics. And I just can't do it, because if I did, someone who actually knows about physics or actually knows about germ biology is going to come along and say, you're a donkey, Caleb. And I will be a donkey, because I'll be talking out my ass about something I don't know anything about. So I just stay away from that kind of thing. All right. Gavin asks, patterns. Is that why rhymes sound so good? Well, my understanding, Gavin, this is what I've always been told, is that rhyming began as a technique to enhance memorization. That when human beings, before they had written language, they would write songs or poetry, and they wanted to remember the words. And so they used rhyming as a technique to increase memorization. That's my understanding. But maybe I'm wrong. But I that's my understanding, is that that rhyming was a technique used to enhance memorization that eventually became used for, it became artistic, and we developed an ear for it, right? We developed an ear for it. I do remember years ago being in school, and this girl gave a book report. And she was a very conservative girl, and she did not like that modern rock music that people were listening to. She was very Christian and conservative, and she began by saying, originally music was just instruments, and there were no words, and that was when it was good. It was only with the invention of lyrics that's not true. That's not actually true. Before there were instruments, there was human voice. There were words to songs before there was ever music. And I remember sitting there and going, oh my God. But yeah, I mean, one thing that people that are familiar with the history of music say is the first songs, the first music had words, right? So that was just bullshit. I remember sitting there and just like hitting myself in the head. Like, did I just hear her say that? But yeah, music had words before it had instruments. So that's just wrong. But there we go. Someone asked, is neurosis like voting for the same party over and over and over again that never delivers? Yeah, in a way. I mean, I am at the point where I think that the USA is a two-party state in the same way some other countries are one-party states. And, people say, oh, a country's a one-party state. That means it's a totalitarian regime. Okay, maybe. Actually, if a country is a one-party state, what that means is that all the differences within the power structure will be within that party. That's what that means, right? And the United States, right? There are differences within the power structure, and the differences are a lot deeper than just D and R, right? We all know that, that Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton wing of the Democratic Party, there were differences there, right? In the Republican Party, the MAGA Republicans and the neocon regular Republicans, there are differences there. And that the two parties in the United States, they have this monopoly on power. It's rigged to make sure we never have any other party emerge, right? But at the same time, because of that, especially as the differences among the capitalists become more and more intense, as a result of that, then there's going to be more diversity within those parties. And that, you're right, that the two capitalist parties that run the United States are both very corrupt, and just aligning with them or pouring our energy into supporting them is not going to help us. But at the same time, also, there are still differences within the ruling class, differences within the power structure. And because we have a two-party system, in another country, there might be 5 or 6 different parties. But in the United States, those differences all get crammed into the 2 parties, right? And that's how it is. I mean, you go to countries that have a one-party state, there's still differences within that party that everybody knows about, right? And that's one thing that people don't seem to realize. They assume that if your country's a one-party state, everyone's a robot. No. Now, is every Democrat the same? Is every Republican the same? No. So there you go. There's a term called gang stalking, where mentally ill people assume they are being stalked every hour of the day. Well, that's too bad, right? That's too bad. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's some things I could say there, but I don't know if I should say them. But, I will say that, let me just put it this way. The media and social media in particular are really good at manipulating people's fears and making people afraid. And that there are some people who get sucked in to a world on the internet where all they think about is serial killers and child abusers and sexual predators, and they just think about that all day long. And they just sit on Twitter and they sit on social media, and all they watch are crime thrillers, and all they watch are true crime and all that. And they get there. I have met these people, and they get in this mindset where it's, if you watched nothing but videos of car accidents all day, pretty soon you're going to think the whole world is made up of car accidents. There are some people they go down this rabbit hole. I don't know what you want to call it. This rabbit hole where the world just consists of stalkers and pedophiles and serial killers and rapists, and they live in this alternate reality where, if you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. You see what you're looking for. And there are certain people that they just get into this mindset where the world revolves around crime and sex crime, right? And the internet helps them do it. And unfortunately, the internet helps them to do it. Real situations like Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes and, various things, Me Too and all that helps these people do it. And they get into this mindset where, you would think that nothing else happens in the world. Nothing else happens in the world, except, and it's really, really sad. And I think I think this is what it is, honestly. And I'm being very polite here. I'm being very careful with my words, but I've done my own version of this before. Let me just put it this way, right? This isn't what these people are like, but sometimes if there's something that really bothers you, right? It could be anything, right? If you're really bothered by insects, right? If you're really bothered by violence, you might think that the way to deal with that is to obsess with the thing that bothers you, right? And this is a really common thing people do, right? They know that they're bothered by something. They're triggered by something. It upsets them. And so in order to try and gain ownership over it, they will just bury themselves in it, right? You don't like bugs. You think bugs are gross. Where you're like, well, I'm going to just look at bugs all day long. And by doing that, then I will no longer have a fear of bugs. It doesn't work that way. In fact, you're going to be more afraid of bugs if you do that, right? You get certain people that it's like, well, car accidents. Take car accidents. There's some people that are really afraid of car accidents. And the way they respond to it is they get on the internet and they read all kinds of articles about car accidents. They become experts on car accidents. And does that help them? No. Makes them, every time they get into a car, they're imagining 12 different types of car accidents that could happen. It doesn't help them. And that it's a failed strategy. People try to own their fear. People think, well, if I can dig deep in, if I'm very afraid of car accidents, for example, right? That's the idea. If you're really afraid of car accidents, I cannot be afraid of car accidents by becoming an expert on car accidents, by knowing about all the car accidents that could ever happen. No, you're not. If you bury yourself in information about car accidents, you're going to be 10 times more afraid of car accidents. And that's a trap people fall into. So if there's something you're really, really afraid of, the worst thing you can do is become an expert on it, because you think it's a delusion people fall into. It's a trap. That if you don't know about something, if you're afraid of something, if I just learn enough about it, if I just obsess with it enough, if I watch videos of it or whatever, that I can somehow, get over my fear. Often it doesn't work that way. It has the opposite effect. And I feel like with sex crime, serial killers, crimes against women, pedophiles, and God knows what, all that stuff, there are certain people that are very afraid of that stuff because it's very awful and because they've been traumatized by it. And they have genuine PTSD that maybe it's directly affected them, or they're very afraid of it happening to them or something. And so they just dive into that stuff. And it doesn't help them. And you look at some of these people, you look at their social media, and it's just every post is about that. You know what I mean? Every post is about rapists and serial killers and murderers, and it's sad. And this person, these people will walk through the streets, they got this scared look on their face, and it's sad. It's sad. It's very, 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 very sad. That's all I can say about it. And social media, let me say this. Social media has the effect of enhancing mental illness. And this hasn't really been talked about, but incels, right? That's been around forever. You ever see the Phantom of the Opera? He's an incel. That's what he is, the Phantom of the Opera. He's got an ugly face, and so he's mad at women, so he's blowing things up and kidnapping people. He's an incel. He's a dude who's mad that he, it's a dude who's mad that he right? That he can't get a girlfriend. And he's mad that he couldn't get a girlfriend or whatever, so he's violent, right? And like if you watch Oklahoma, watch the musical Oklahoma, Judd Fry in Oklahoma. Judd Fry in Oklahoma, he's a guy who he wants a woman so bad he's lonely, so he becomes a murderer. That's been around forever. Guys who can't get a girlfriend, and they get mad about it, and they, and it's almost like a phase that young men have to go through, right? There's a time in every young man's life where he feels he's just been rejected by women, and women are so awful, and they, it happens. Most men go through a phase like that, but they get over it. Usually they get over it, right? And they just get over it. The internet has created this way for a young man who's in that phase. He's in that angry at women, feels like women don't like him phase, where he can then get on the internet and join a community of other guys who feel that way and tell him, oh yeah, it's hopeless. And they've developed this whole worldview and ideology surrounding it. And they start feeding off of each other's mental illness. And pretty soon you have the incel phenomenon. That's where the incel stuff came from, right? It's normal for men, young men, teenage boys to feel that way a little bit. And there's always been a layer of men who have resentment against women because they want one, because they want a girlfriend, they want a wife, and they don't have one, right? That's always been around. There's nothing new about that. Nothing new about it at all. But what's new is now they have a community, and people who might have just slightly had these feelings can talk to other people who have these feelings, and they intensify it, and now we have incel shooters and incel communities and incel meetups, and it's not good, right? And that is a side effect of the internet, is that it enables people to play off of each other's mental illness. it also enables people to build community around it, build identity around mental illness. And that's a big problem with the internet. And, there's a lot of trends in our society that have always been around. They've always been around. But there you go. There you go. There you go. All righty. That's when you talk about people who think they're being stalked all the time. That's what got me going there. My opinion about Andrew Tate's arrest. Look, I'll just be honest with you. All right. I'm just going to tell you what I know about Andrew Tate. This is all I know about Andrew Tate. This is it. Haas and I parted ways. Hinkle is obviously not friendly to me anymore, and Haas went his own way. I still have a positive opinion of Haas, and whatever. I mean, he's doing his own thing, and that's okay. No resentment on my end, whatever. Right? A couple weeks ago, I started getting inbox messages from people saying, "Hey, Caleb, have you heard that Haas and Jackson Hinkle and Samira are working with Andrew Tate?" And I didn't know who that was, and I didn't reply. And they replied, "Aren't you mad about it? Here's all this negative information about Andrew Tate." I'd never heard of Andrew Tate before. Viking Dave, I'm with you. I don't know who Andrew Tate is. I have no idea who Andrew Tate is. And then you send me a resume about how bad he is. And I see that, and I'm just like, okay, well, I don't know who he is. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. A lot of people, anyone who ever associates with me gets sent a big, long manifesto about how evil I am. And I don't endorse that. So when people send me, "Aren't you mad at so-and-so for associating with so-and-so? Here's a big, long manifesto about," I just ignore it. That's my response, right? And please, if anyone sends you, first of all, if you're on these streams long enough, eventually they're going to send you a manifesto about how evil I am. And I would ignore that. And if you send me a manifesto about, "Hey, Caleb, did you know that like Jenny Lynn, who's in your chat, once talked to a guy who's friends with somebody who did blah, 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 blah." I'm not interested. I really am not interested. That's how cancel culture works. So I had never heard of Andrew Tate. I got cancel culture messages sent to me. "Aren't you mad that Haas and Jackson Hinkle and Samira are associating with this person who's blah, 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 blah." I don't know if he's blah, 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 blah. That's just what you said. I really have no interest in doing the research to find out. They're doing their own thing. They're not associated with me in any way. So I don't care. And that was my response. And I just ignored those messages. And that was that. I just don't care, right? They're doing their own thing. They disagree with me on a lot of points. They don't talk the way I talk. They talk very differently from me. And they're doing their own thing. And we parted ways, and people know some drama happened or whatever. So we're not in communication. We're not talking. They're doing their thing. I'm doing my thing, right? Nothing to do with each other. Never the twain shall meet. I don't care. And so I'm just like, all these people, I got 3 or 4 messages of people wanting me to do something about it. And I'm just thinking, like, I'm not going to do something about it. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, get on the internet. I denounce. I'm not going to do that. I don't care. I just don't care enough. And if there was any reason for me to do something like that, it wouldn't be because somebody inboxed me. All right. I'll just tell you that. I suppose if I really cared, I could go and research this Andrew Tate character and be like, I shall crack the Andrew Tate case and come out with a position. I don't care. So that's what happened. And I just don't care. I just don't care. And I'm glad you're glad, class, because I just don't care. I've learned after years of being on the internet, I have learned not to care. So then, like today or yesterday, all of a sudden it was all over Twitter. Andrew Tate got arrested, and he had a Twitter war with Greta Thunberg, and then he got arrested. Again, I don't know who he is. I don't know why he got arrested. I don't know. I mean, I don't like Greta Thunberg, but maybe he's an asshole too. I don't know. And I don't care enough to know. I just don't care. And I just don't care. And I don't like this. I don't like it. Right. And honestly, I think by not, I made a tweet. I said, "Who is Andrew Tate? Why was he arrested? Why is this all over my Twitter feed?" And I let people respond, and I got a variety of different responses. And all those responses said to me, "Yeah, stay out of this one. You don't know anything about it." And, I feel like it is my obligation, if I don't know what's going on, to stay out of it. And that's what I would encourage you to do. If you don't know about somebody, You're not intensely following some case and you just hear that something happened with somebody, don't dogpile. Right? There's all kinds of people who don't know anything about me. They know nothing about me. They know nothing about what I stand for. They know nothing about anything. Right? They just saw some tweet or saw some dumb YouTube video, and based on that, they like go into this whole thing about me. Well, I really would appreciate people not do that. Now, if people watch these streams, listen to what I have to say, and then want to, disagree with me, that's on them. But like, people think they know about somebody by reading a tweet. I don't know anything about this Andrew Tate guy. I don't know anything about it. Right? And I know also that there's all kinds of stuff about me on the internet that's bullshit. And that if all you knew about me was what you saw in some tweets or what somebody inboxed you, you wouldn't know a damn thing about me either. So I just don't talk about Andrew Tate unless you really know about it. Unless you really, you know who this guy is, you know the case, you know the details, don't talk about it. And that's just how I feel. I don't know what's going on. I don't know, right? Maybe this guy is an awful person who deserved to be arrested. Maybe he's not. I don't know enough about it. And the problem with social media is everyone feels obligated. When the mob on social media is saying one thing, everyone feels this obligation to agree. It's like, oh, look, all these people can't be wrong. Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. All those people can be wrong, but all those people can also be right. So I don't know. I have no idea who Andrew Tate is. I think someone told me he used to be a boxer or an MMA fighter or something, and he does a social media channel. Okay, I've never watched his channel. I don't consume his content. I've never watched his channel, and I don't care. And I have no idea why he was arrested, and I don't know enough about it. And I don't know enough about it. And I have been the victim of people on social media all, thinking they know about me when they don't. Right? And that's the thing is I don't know about this Tate guy. I have no idea what the allegations against him are. I have no idea what he believes. I don't know anything about him. Nothing. So like, how am I supposed, and the more I hear about it, the more it sounds like something I just don't care about. I don't want to know. I don't want to know who he is. I don't know what, I mean, I don't like Greta Thunberg. I don't like her. So, but just because he's against her doesn't mean he's good. There's a lot of awful, awful people who are against her. So I just don't know. I have no knowledge of this case. I don't know anything about it. And I wish people would do the responsible thing. And just when they don't know about something, either investigate it or don't, right? Mao Zedong, he said, no investigation, no right to speak, right? If I really cared about this Andrew Tate thing, if I really cared, I would do a deep dive investigation. I would learn all about this person, and I would find out who he's backing and who's against him and what. I don't care enough to do that. I just don't care enough. And because I don't care enough, I don't want to comment on it. And if it was a thing I really had to investigate and I really had to look into, I would do a thorough deep dive investigation and study the case, learn all the facts, and then make my decision. But because I don't have the time or interest to do that, I'm not going to. And that's what you should do. If somebody comes to you and says, denounce Joe Bob, if you don't do a thorough investigation into who Joe Bob is, you shouldn't do that. That doesn't mean you should support Joe Bob. Right? If you don't know Joe Bob, you don't know who Joe Bob is, and people are coming to you and saying, denounce Joe Bob, either do a thorough investigation of Joe Bob or say nothing. That's it. That's all you should do. Those are your only two options. I am tired of this, I am tired of this culture where it's like, oh, the Twitter mob said something. They can't be wrong. Yes, they can. But they can also be right. So if you don't know about it, don't say anything. And I encourage you, if you don't know about Andrew Tate and you don't want to know, don't say anything. There you go. I mean, it's that simple. And if you do know about Andrew Tate and you've done an investigation and you confidently feel one way, say it. But if you don't care enough to do a thorough investigation, to learn who this guy is, to learn why he got arrested, if you don't care enough, keep your mouth shut. That's my advice. Like, and yeah, and someone's saying a video on Tate would be a waste of my time. Yeah, it's not something I want to do. I don't want to know who this guy is. I don't care who he is. I just don't care. I don't care, and if I were to say something, it would be coming from a position of not knowing. And that's a reason not to say something. I know who Greta Thunberg is, and I don't like her. And I've done enough investigation to know that she thinks economic growth is bad. She's being promoted by the World Economic Forum and by the degrowthers. I don't like her. But just because somebody doesn't like Greta Thunberg doesn't necessarily mean they're right. So I just don't know. I don't know. But this is what they do now. I will say this, is whenever they're trying to justify a crackdown on somebody, they create a social media disinformation campaign about them. Right? I'm not saying that's what's happening to him because I don't know about it. And I said that a bunch of times. So please don't say that I'm saying that he's victim of a disinformation campaign. That's not what I said because I don't know enough to say that. But like at our conference, we had the Uhuru movement that is under attack by the American government speak at our conference. The Uhuru movement, I know about. These are black liberation activists who are anti-imperialists, who stand with Russia, and the U.S. government raided their homes, pointed guns in their faces, and terrorized them. And a week later, we had them come to our conference and we defended them. All of Breadtube that claim to be so woke, and they love Fred Hampton, and they love the Black Panthers, and they're just so woke. They have Black Lives Matter tattooed on their chest, and oh my God, and they just they're so woke. They just love black freedom. They're just the most woke people. You know what they did? This is what they did in response to the Uhuru movement being the victim of FBI raids. They said, the Uhuru movement is the same as Black Hammer, which it ain't. And Black Hammer is accused of all these things that Uhuru is not accused of. So therefore, they deserved it. And that's what Vosh said on his stream. That's what all of them said. That is disinformation. Uhuru is not Black Hammer. Uhuru is not accused of kidnapping or false imprisonment, and no one died in the Uhuru movement. It's a lie. But it's all over Twitter that Uhuru movement deserves what they're getting from the FBI because they're the same as Black Hammer. And that is the power of disinformation. And what's going on is the FBI wants to go after the Uhuru movement. But they know for the government to go after a group of black revolutionaries right now ain't a good look. So they've clearly intentionally created a disinformation campaign to convince you that Uhuru movement is the same as this other group. Now, I don't even know if Black Hammer is guilty of what they're charged with, honestly. I don't know. I just don't know the details, right? I mean, I know that there's these allegations against them, but even Black Hammer, right? Like, I mean, yeah, I don't agree with them. And Uhuru also. I don't agree with Uhuru's position on the white working class. I don't agree with their position that the white people are the exploiters. They have that line. I don't agree with that. Black Hammer thinks the same thing. I don't agree with that. They take the position that the white working class are not working class. They're exploiters. It's like the third worldist position. It's not my position. That doesn't matter. Black Hammer has taken that position to some rather extreme things. They burned copies of what's her name? Anne Frank's, diaries and stuff. That's not cool. I wouldn't do that. But that doesn't mean they deserve to be locked up and killed by the government. Doesn't mean they deserve to have their homes raided by the FBI. You know, they've accused them of some nasty things. I don't even know that they're guilty necessarily of what they've been charged with. They might be, but maybe they're not. Right. And maybe, you know, we shouldn't all be cheering when the government goes after a group of black activists who take anti-imperialist positions. Right. And so, you know, on top of that, we don't even know if Black Hammer is guilty of what they're charged with. Uhuru has nothing to do with Black Hammer, a completely separate group. But Breadtube, Vosh, ContraPoints, Thought Slime, all of them support the U.S. government going after this group of black revolutionaries. All of them. All of them. Right? All the big bread tubers support the U.S. government raiding the homes of the Uhuru movement. And if that doesn't tell you right there who they work for, and this is how they work. This is how the U.S. government works. In order to get somebody, you have to create a disinformation campaign. Right? Before Hitler put the Jews in the gas chambers, he had this guy named Julius Streicher. And Julius Streicher made all kinds of propaganda to convince the German people the Jews deserved it. Well, that's what Breadtube is. Before the U.S. government raided the homes of Uhuru, they went to Vosh and Thought Slime and ContraPoints and said, all right, now when we do this, you're going to say they're Black Hammer so that all these people who claim they're concerned about black rights won't do anything about it. Right? And it just shows you these people ain't woke. If Fred Hampton was alive today and Fred Hampton was murdered by the U.S. government, they'd find an excuse to support it. What these people don't understand is that revolutionaries never support and go along with the ruling class. If you're on the same team as the ruling class, in most circumstances, you ain't a fucking revolutionary. These people don't get this. It's cool now to support Fred Hampton. But back in the 1960s, if you supported Fred Hampton, you got canceled for it. You lost your job for it. These fucking people don't understand that. You're not a revolutionary by being cool. You're not a revolutionary by going along with what the government wants you to believe, with what mainstream media wants you to believe. And it's beyond me how these people don't get that. And it infuriates me. It infuriates me that they don't get that. These were the very people that they would have been supporting the murder of Fred Hampton, right? The next day in the Chicago newspaper, what did the headline of the paper say? Vicious Panther attack. And they blamed the Black Panthers. And these are the same people that say, if you disagree with mainstream media, you're spreading conspiracy theories. You're working for the Russians, the enemy. They would have supported killing Fred Hampton because mainstream media doesn't lie. Are you spreading conspiracy theories? That sounds like Russian disinformation. Wasn't Fred Hampton tied in with the communist group? That's how they would have talked. Revolutionary, if the government is telling you to do something and is promoting something, for the most part, repeating it loudly doesn't make you a revolutionary. And nothing pisses me off more than when people take absolutely mainstream positions and act like they're martyrs for doing it. I just want to slap them. It infuriates me. All the shit I've taken in my life for being a revolutionary, for being an anti-imperialist, for supporting North Korea and Cuba and Venezuela and Russia and China, right? All the shit I've taken in my life for those positions. And these people say exactly what their bosses and their college professors and their teachers and mainstream media says. And not only do they not have the power to think independently, but they walk around like they're heroes. You know, when I was in college, there were all these shitheads who would never protest the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Never had the courage to protest the invasion of Iraq. But they took a stand for Darfur. I'm outraged by China's backing of genocide in Darfur. Shut the fuck up. You don't know anything about Africa. You don't have the courage to protest what your own government is doing. You think you're some kind of a heroic martyr. You know, I was at the UN one day, and a busload of high school kids that were there with Amnesty International walked in. And these kids, they've all got their piercings and their tattoos and their long hair. And this one kid gets off the bus. He's got a shirt, Free North Korea. Oh, wow. What a radical you are, kid. Yeah, that's right. You know, you're sticking it to Kim Jong-un in America. right? I mean, that takes courage. Everyone here loves Kim Jong-un. Everyone here loves North Korea. Free North Korea. Yeah, free North Korea. I'm a revolutionary. Oh, shut the fuck up. I hate this. I really, really, really hate this. I've always hated this. I've always hated this. When people repeat the government line, they repeat the standard line, and somehow they dress it up as this like righteous, heroic stand. Yeah, people that take righteous, heroic stands go to jail for saying it. Martin Luther King went to jail for what he believed. He eventually got killed for saying it. So no, you wearing your Free North Korea t-shirt doesn't make you a hero. It doesn't. I'm sorry, I'm getting all bent out of shape here, but it must be said. I mean, it's so annoying to me. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when people think that somehow they're being heroic by following the ruling party line and repeating the lies of the ruling class. Somehow they're like sticking it to the man or something. No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. Right? And the fact that these people found an excuse to support at a time when they're all doing this stupid performative wokeness, they're all such experts on white privilege, they all love the Panthers, and then the U.S. government raids the home of a group of black revolutionaries. And they lie in order to support it. That shows me who these people really work for. And we shouldn't be surprised. The fact that certain YouTube channels get hundreds of thousands of views lying about socialism, lying to support U.S. foreign policy, and we get marginalized, we shouldn't be surprised by that at all. Because that shows that, we're being marginalized. We're genuinely a threat to the status quo. Now, the time will come when the divisions in the ruling class will intensify, when the contradictions of capitalist society will be such that the society can't continue to function in the old way. They will become such that there will be an opening for us to build an anti-imperialist revolutionary movement, right? And that we will continue. We're going to be on the margins of U.S. society for the time being, right? We are. But we can build on the margins. We can build on the margins. We can build our community. We can build our network of people. And that should be our focus. This online stuff, this is great. And I'm going to keep being on here every night. And this keeps us alive. Every time you come on this stream, you're connected to this community. And that's why it's important that I do this every night, because you're connecting to this community. Right? And that's why I'm on here. I want to connect with all of you, right? You're connecting to the community. This is a breath of life. This is a spiritual connection to our community that you have on here. So we're going to keep doing this online stuff, but it ain't just about that. It's about building community. It's about building a network. It's about having events, about knowing each other, loving each other, learning to trust each other, building a network. And then when the time is right, the capitalists will begin fighting more intensely with each other. The working class will be brought more into the political sphere. The conditions in the country will worsen. And there will become a time when our network and our community, based on our ideology and our beliefs, will expand to be much more than it is. I believe that we will play an integral part. We will be a small part of America moving toward 21st century socialism. We'll be part of it. We'll be part of 21st century socialism coming to America. It'll be much bigger forces involved than us. There will be people in the government that are already in the government now that come over to our side, or we come over to their side, or whatever, however you want to put it. There will be all kinds of things that will have to happen. We will be a small part, but we will be laying the ideological foundation, because no one's talking like us. All around the world, communists talk like us. In Africa, communists talk like us. In Asia, communists talk like us. In Latin America, communists talk like us. But here in the United States, they don't. They don't, right? I mean, name me one communist party that is in the world and in power anywhere. Name one communist party that is in power that doesn't support Russia. Name one. One communist party that's in power, that's running the government, and doesn't support Russia. There isn't one. The Communist Party of Vietnam supports Russia. The Communist Party of Cuba supports Russia. The Communist Party of China supports Russia. The Communist Party, the Korean Workers' Party, they support Russia. The Communist Party, the Nicaraguan Sandinistas, they support Russia. The United Socialist Party of Venezuela, they support Russia. Name one. There is no communist party that is in power anywhere in the world that doesn't support Russia. Right? The MPLA of Angola, they support Russia. The South African Communist Party, they support Russia. There's no communist party that is in power, that is the ruling party, that does not support Russia. In Kerala, India, the communists run this province of India. The Communist Party of India, Marxists, they run India. And you know what? They support Russia. These are facts. These are facts, folks. Communists everywhere sound like me and don't sound like these idiots on the internet. That's just a fact, right? Communists around the world support Russia. Communists in America ain't communists. They're hipster kids LARPing, And on top of that, right, I've said many times that people should be able to live their lives. If people want to be gay, they can be gay. People want to be trans, they can be trans. It's not my business. But do you think that look at what the Korean Workers' Party has written about homosexuality. Look at what, in China, what is the attitude toward homosexuality? What is the attitude toward homosexuality in Vietnam? What is a lot of these places are blatantly anti-gay. Cuba is very pro-LGBT, right? They have gay marriage there, etc. But if you think that obsessing with the LGBT issue is what it means to be a communist, you have no idea what the international communist movement is about. In the third world, there is a big layer of communists who think homosexuality is bourgeois decadence. And there's a big layer who don't. There are many communists who think the opposite, who think that homosexuality should be supported. They support LGBT rights. But if you think that communists around the world are like American communists, where they sit around and obsess about LGBT rights and they're canceling people for being transphobes, that's just not what they're doing. Even in Cuba, the Communist Party in Cuba, they're pro-trans, they're pro-LGBT, but do you think that they're canceling people who aren't? No. Do you think that, that they're kicking out and expelling members of the party that don't agree with that? No. No, they're not, right? That's just, they've taken that position. And that's to their credit. I agree with that position. I think it's good that Cubans can get married. Cubans of the same gender can get married now. I think that's a good thing, right? But at the same time, I also think it's good that the Cuban Communist Party doesn't obsess about that issue. It's something that they have changed their position on over the years. I respect that, but they don't make that the focus, because that's not what being a communist is about. Being a communist is not about obsessing with woke cultural crap. That's just not what being a communist is about. And if you think that's what it's about, or you want me to be about that, you're in the wrong stream. And I'm at the point where I'm not worried. If you're listening to this now and saying, oh my God, Caleb, even though he supports gay marriage, even though he has trans friends and respects trans people, he's erasing my identity by not talking about my issue on the stream. Well, then get lost. I don't care. I'm not going to pander to wokeness. But to be fair, if you are somebody who is anti-LGBT, if you think that homosexuality is bourgeois decadence, you are of the position that trans women are threats to regular women, and you want me, and you're saying, why is Caleb not standing up against the menace of homosexuality? Well, you're on the wrong stream as well. Right? That's not what I'm on here to talk about. I am not on here to talk about sex. I'm not on here to talk about people's personal lives. You can live your personal life however you want. I don't care. You can be married. You can be not married. You can be polyamorous. You can be monogamous. You can be homosexual. You can be bisexual. You can be transsexual. I don't care. I'm not on here to talk about that. I am not on this stream to compare my sex life to yours. I am not on this stream to criticize your sex life, to approve of your sex life or disapprove of it. I'm just not here to do that. And if that isn't enough for you, whatever position you take, you're in the wrong place. And I will stand firm in this. I want trans and gay people to feel welcome in CPI, and I want people that are morally opposed to both of those things to also feel welcome in CPI. That's what I want. If you're trans or gay, I want you to feel welcome here. And if you're opposed to those things because you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew and you oppose those things, or a Buddhist or whatever, I want you to feel welcome here as well. And I am sick and tired of communist spaces obsessing over that issue. I am sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of it. I did not become a communist. When I was young and I got interested in communism, do you think I heard, wow, there's this group of people somewhere who are gay? No, it's not. Oh, wow, there's this group of people that are anti-gay. No, I didn't get interested in communism to talk about gay people or opposing gay people. I just didn't. I'm just not interested in that. And YouTube is full of, channels all about that. And there's all kinds of groups you can join, woke activist groups that'll do that with you, that'll accommodate that on your part. I ain't going to do that. I ain't going to do that. And like I said, I'm at the point, better, fewer, but better. Better, fewer, but better. I would rather work with people who get this and have fewer of them than work with a lot of people who don't get this. Because I like to get along with people. It's one of my weaknesses. I want to get along with people. I like to build community. I like to see people coming together. And because of that, I will often tolerate bullshit from people. And I will often chase after people and try to get people to be part of communities they're reluctant to be involved with. And if I'm going to have a New Year's resolution this year, it is no more chasing after people. You don't want to be here? Move along. Move along. Olympia, she knows me well. Olympia knows me well, and I'm Mr. Nice. Exactly. I am Mr. Nice. I am Mr. Nice. It's funny. I got upgraded to supervillain this year, but I'm Mr. Nice. I'm way too nice. And, I am way too nice. And this year, I'm not chasing after anybody. I'm not going to be mean to people. I'm not going to be mean to people. I'm not going to drive people away. But if people don't want, don't want what I have to offer, don't want what CPI has to offer, see ya. A lot of the problems we had this year were more or less rooted in the fact that there were people who were just along for the ride. Now, obviously, the fact that a lot of people were just along for the ride came up at a certain time. But the problem really was that there were certain people that were just along for the ride. They hadn't read my books. They hadn't attended our lectures. They hadn't watched the Saxton lectures. They hadn't listened to what it was about. They just said, Caleb's got resources. Caleb's got money. Caleb's got a group of people around him. He can do stuff. And so maybe we can benefit from being around this group that's got resources and got money and stuff like that. And that was my mistake. And that happens, right? It's one of the dangers of doing stuff, right? When you appear to have resources and you appear to be doing stuff and you're building a community, there's going to be a lot of people who come along. To be part of this community, you have to know what it's about, right? You have to know what it's about. You have to, if you're going to be part of building CPI, you need to read this book, our educational manual, and you need to more or less agree with it. And we want to get you to the point that you can teach it to other people. And that there were a lot of people who had weaseled their way into positions where they could do a lot of damage. They had never read that book. They had never read this book. This was our educational manual, our beliefs. There were a number of people who weaseled their way into positions in the group in which they could do a lot of damage. And they never read this book. That will never happen again. That will never happen again. Right? And I'm too nice. I really am. The second somebody came along and they weren't familiar with this book, and the second I said to them, get into this book, and they didn't want to, they knew it all already, or whatever, then be gone. Look, there are certain type of people, right? And I'm not being unfair to men, because there's women like this too, but it's much more pronounced in men. You can't teach them anything. They know everything already. Well, you know what? This is an education project. So if we can't teach you anything, you really shouldn't be here. Because that's the whole point of the CPI, is we're here to teach people. So it's a socialist education project. So if you are so confident that you already know everything, then you really shouldn't be here, because we're a group that teaches people. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's just, one of my biggest regrets, I'll say this, is when I was a young man, I wanted people to know how smart I was. So someone would be telling me something. Yeah, we have audiobooks. We've got audiobooks. There are audiobooks on the YouTube channel, Aaron. When someone would be telling me something, rather than letting them finish their sentence, I would interrupt them and say, "Oh yeah, I know that, but no. You just got to be patient, right? If you want people to know how educated you are and how well informed you are, what you need to do is wait. And sometimes someone telling you something, it's not because they think you're stupid and don't know it. It's because it means something to them. And one of my biggest regrets is when I was a young man, I was very defensive about what I knew. Very, very defensive about what I knew. And because I was defensive about what I knew, I would not let people around me finish their sentences because I needed to prove to them that I knew something. No, you don't want to do that. I'll never forget, there was a funny story. Now we're back to 12 years ago today when I moved to New York City. I guess we'll just end with this. I could go on all night, and I'm going to stream tomorrow. 12 years ago, when I moved to New York City, I slept at various people's apartments before I eventually got my own place to stay. I rented a basement in Queens. That was the first place I lived. But before I rented that basement, for the first couple months, I was couch surfing. There was an older lady who I couch surfed. I slept at her place. There was an older lady I stayed with. And this older lady, she was an older communist in her 70s. And for a while, I just couldn't stand her. Because she would just start telling me like basic facts about communism. Like, oh, well, there's the proletarians and the workers. And I would get so angry with her. And I would say, yeah, I know that. But then I realized after a while, just let her get it out. Just let her get it out. And so I would sit there and she would explain to me basic things. And it was like a tape recorder. You just had to push play and just let the tape run out. So I would sit there and she would tell me things that I knew. She would speak to me in a kind of condescending way. But once the tape, if I let her get the tape out, once she was finally done, right? And sometimes she went on for a good 20, 30 minutes, right? It was not easy. But once the tape ran out, then she would listen to me. And once I learned that, I let the tape run out. Our relationship got way better. Suddenly, then living with her was a joy. And I think it was just that she felt that she'd never been listened to. I think that she was an older lady and people didn't take the time to listen to her. She wanted to be listened to. And she genuinely did believe in communism and cared about communism. So I learned to just shut my mouth. Don't say I know. Don't, just let her talk. And if I would do that, our relationship vastly improved. And I learned from that, right? And I look back on that, and there's been many instances in my life that I can remember where someone's trying to tell me something that's important for them. And I interrupted them. And I regret that because, often people say things and it's not necessarily because they want you to hear it. They want to hear themselves tell it to you. Do you know what I'm saying? It's important for them to have said it to you. So if you go, yeah, I know that, but big wrong, big mistake. Big mistake. Big mistake. You just got to let people say what they want to say. Again, I'm widely attacked for doing a listening exercise. God forbid. I do this listening exercise with people in the group, and we're going to keep doing that, right? If you're helping out with our March 25th conference, you're going to do the listening exercise. And if you think that's a cult, get lost, right? You're going to do the listening exercise, right? And you're going to do some other exercises because we're trying to build an organization here. You got to have people skills, right? And that, there you go. There you go. But anyway, that was like a little story that I just told there. But, you know, it needed to be told. I think it's an important story. But anyway, folks, I just want to end tonight's stream by saying I want to thank you all, especially all of you who sent me birthday messages. I want to thank you all. I'm 35 years old, 12 years I've been in this city. We're marching ahead, and I've got a good feeling about 2023. I've got a good feeling about it. I've got a good feeling about it. So, you know, let's make it a good year. Stay strong. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night, everybody. See you tomorrow.